I'm happy to welcome you all for this session this afternoon, where we will hopefully, I'm sure we will, get to know a bit more about the upcoming elections in the Faroe Islands. And to update us all, we are very glad to welcome Heini, who joins us from Tórshavn this afternoon. And Heini is with the University of the Faroe Islands and is also, at least here in the Danish-speaking world, known as a co-hoster of the podcast Rigsrådet that covers affairs in the Faroe Islands, Greenland and Denmark. So we have agreed with Heini that he'll kick off doing a presentation, and then that should take maybe around 15-20 minutes, covering various aspects of the elections and other current affairs topics in the Faroe Islands. And then after Heini's presentation, we will go to the Q&A, where when we get to that point, I'll ask all of you to just use the chat function to say that you have a question. And then today, since we are all online, I'll just open up for questions. So you, if you get the chance to ask a question, you can open your microphone, and hopefully then Heini can answer online as well. We discussed with Heini here if he should do present some slides as well this afternoon, but we've agreed that that he'll just stick to an oral presentation. But we've also agreed that afterwards, because I know that Heini has got some data and some slides on some of the topics that he's going to cover, that I will provide his email address to all of you afterwards, and then you're most welcome to get in touch directly with Heini to ask any follow-up questions, and also on some of the data that will back up some of his points that he's going to make in his presentation. So without much more from me, I'm just happy to welcome you, Heini. It's the first time here with the IPC, but we are very glad you could make it this afternoon. So warm welcome from all of us, and the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor, and I hope that I will succeed in providing you with some more knowledge and background information on the Faroe Islands as such, this very tiny archipelago in the North Atlantic, and what is happening here, and also how the North Atlantic mandates, both the Faroese mandates and the Greenlandic mandates, may become decisive for the Danish election and the formation of a Danish government. So I have been, I would like to focus on three issues. First, the Danish and the Faroese elections, which are taking place simultaneously. And then I will talk about one topic that is quite important in the Faroese election campaign race, which is the whole debate on statehood or independence, the ambition to establish a full sovereign state without necessarily leaving the union, the Danish union. It's more a question of modernizing or updating the Kingdom of Denmark between Greenland, the Faroes, and Denmark. And thirdly, I will briefly talk about the geopolitical context, because the domestic debates on statehood, they never unfold in a vacuum. They're always part of a geopolitical context with rising tensions between the superpowers. And I will briefly talk about both the US, Donald Trump's appetite for Greenland, how that shapes the debate on statehood. And I will also briefly talk about Russia, because the Faroe Islands and Russia do have a quite close cooperation in the field of fishery and trade. And that's a recurrent source of conflict also in the Faroese debate and in Faroese politics as such. So let's start with the elections, which is why I'm here today. We have two elections, one on March 24, the national election in Denmark, where the Faroe Islands is electing 2 mandates, just like Greenland is electing 2 mandates. And then we also have national elections 2 days after that, on March 26. And these 2 elections are not linked. They should be regarded as separate. And it's a quite confusing situation that there are 2 election races taking place at the same time. It has, as far as I know, it has never happened before. So it's quite confusing also for the parties and the candidates. But it means that the primary election, in the Faroes is the Faroese election for the national parliament here in Tórshavn, while the Danish election becomes somewhat secondary. It becomes somehow a background election compared to the primary election for the Faroese parliament. It can maybe be compared to the European Union elections that are taking place in different nation states around Europe, where voting participation is a little bit lower, and it's considered something which is more far away from everyday politics in the Faroes, because the Faroe Islands is a self-governing territory within the kingdom with quite considerable self-governance. The Faroe Islands has taken over more and more policy areas throughout the years and the decades, and many of the big policy areas are under Faroese jurisdiction and responsibility, even though there are still some very decisive policy areas that are still under Danish control and Danish jurisdiction, such as defense and security, foreign affairs, currency, and the courts, to name some of the larger policy areas that have not been taken over by the Faroe Islands, that are still under Danish control. But otherwise, the Faroese national election is considered as the primary election here in the Faroes. And according to the polls, if we look at the surveys that are taking place right now, it is quite likely that the Faroe Islands will get a new right-wing conservative government that will replace a social democratic-led government that is in power today. And the debate on statehood or independence is indeed a part of the election race here in the Faroe Islands that I will get back to in a second. With regard to the Danish election, the 4 North Atlantic mandates, 2 from the Faroe Islands and 2 from Greenland, they usually say, at least the Faroese candidates, that they don't engage in Danish domestic politics. They only engage with regard to issues that are relevant for the Faroe Islands. However, we have seen several times that these mandates may become decisive, may be the decisive votes when it comes to the formation of a government in Copenhagen. They may be the tipping point deciding whether we get a blue government or a red government or something in between. So whether they like it or not, whether they want it or not, they may very well become decisive. And even though we see in the polls for the Faroese national elections that it's the right wing, the conservative parties that are leading the polls, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Faroe Islands will send 2 blue or right wing mandates to Copenhagen, because people distinguish between these 2, and the election for the Danish government is very much based on individual profiles and not that much on parties. So voters might vote for one party during the national Faroese election and another party for the Danish election. So it's quite unclear whether, or how, what mandates will be representing the Faroes in the Danish parliament. But it's very interesting to see whether or not the North Atlantic mandates will end up in a key role when it comes to the formation of a Danish government. And that raises the whole debate on democratic legitimacy, because there are also people and politicians in the Faroes who think that we should abolish the Faroese seats in the Danish parliament, because politics is run by the Faroese government. And for instance, if there will be negotiations in the future on statehood, that is something that is taking place between the Faroese and the Danish and potentially also the Greenlandic government. And that is not up to Faroese PMs in Denmark to decide. And we even have currently a Faroese PM in the Danish parliament who's openly saying that we should abolish these seats because it's not democratically viable that the voters in the Faroe Islands and Greenland, these micro societies with 50,000 people, should be decisive when it comes to who seizes the governmental power in Copenhagen. And the counter argument is that, of course, as long as we have a kingdom with 3 self-governing entities, Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroes, we should, of course, it's our constitutional right to have representation in the Danish parliament as well, just like the island of Bornholm has 2 mandates, so do the Faroes and Greenland have 2 mandates. So that's also a discussion in and of itself. As I said, one of many different topics in the current election races in the Faroe Islands is the question on statehood or independence. And during the last 4 years, there has emerged a consensus in Faroese politics that statehood is the next step. And that means, the establishment of a full and sovereign Faroese state. But it doesn't mean leaving the kingdom, leaving the Danish Commonwealth or the realm or whatever we call it. The current Faroese Prime Minister has constantly repeated that we would like to establish a state, but we would also like to continue a close cooperation with Denmark, for instance, within the field of security and defense, and maybe also currency and the courts and the whole justice system like today. So it's more a matter of modernizing or redefining the union, but it would, of course, be a radical break with the current constitutional status. And the next question is then, why does the Faroe Islands want to establish a sovereign state? In contrast to Greenland, I think it's very much a pragmatic, practical, economic. There are some economic interests in play. The Faroe Islands is a very open economy. We produce almost everything that we export. I'll try and repeat that. Everything that we produce, we also export, and everything that we consume, almost everything that we consume, is something that we import. So the Faroe Islands is a very open economy, which is in dire need of good free trade agreement and good market access. And it's mainly fishery products that are being exported to the whole world, farmed salmon and fish. And we see that as long as we are a non-sovereign entity within the kingdom, it proves very hard to get to negotiate new and better free trade agreements, because international organizations are a club of states. So a precondition for getting better free trade agreements in the world is to be a state. So you can join all sorts of different international organizations. And 5 out of 6 Faroese parties are in favor of doing that. However, this debate doesn't unfold in a vacuum, of course. The geopolitical context is always shaping local debates on statehood and independence. And given the geopolitical climate and the crisis, the ongoing crisis between Washington and Copenhagen and Nuuk, due to Donald Trump's appetite for Greenland and his threats to acquire Greenland one way or the other, that has shaped the debate, and it means in practice that now is perhaps not the timing to launch negotiations on statehood, because the insecurity in the international climate is so high. Everything is unpredictable. We have a very unpredictable regime in Washington, and so timing is essential. And there is an atmosphere that when we launch negotiations, we have to be prepared, and it's also good that it is in peacetime or during peacetime, during normal times, if normal times will ever return in international politics. So I think you could say that the current geopolitical climate has somewhat slowed down this process of statehood, even though that's not the public reason why no negotiations have been launched so far. And the Faroe Islands have in many respects been, watching on the sidelines, observing this the drama taking place between Denmark, the US, and Greenland. The Faroe Islands have been laying low and finding their own feet in this new geopolitical crisis. But the Faroe Islands is also strategically placed in the so-called GIUK gap, the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, where military traffic is on the rise. And we experienced that with, new military surveillance radars that are supposed to be installed in the near future. And we have also, at our university, as part of a research project, we have also been documenting the rise in military traffic, especially American military traffic in Faroese waters, showing their presence, and probably in order to signal deterrence. A few years ago, it would be mere science fiction to see a big nuclear-driven US submarine surfacing in Faroese waters or entering a Faroese village, but that is not the case today. So things have changed at a rapid pace in the Faroe Islands. And the big question is, of course, how should rising American military presence be viewed? Because a few years ago, the Faroes is a part of NATO, and a few years ago it was probably perceived as an ally. But given the Trump presidency and its behavior vis-a-vis Greenland, public perception also in the Faroes is changing, and now you view military presence, American military presence, with more suspicion. Which leads me to the final point on Russia, because one thing is American military presence in Faroese waters, but the Faroe Islands has also adopted a bilateral fishery agreement with Russia. This is an agreement that goes back to the late 70s. The first bilateral fishery agreement between the Faroes and Russia was adopted in 1977. And this agreement has been adopted every year ever since. It has triggered, a lot of internal domestic debate and conflict in the Faroe Islands after the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, because some of these fishery vessels or ships have been accused of espionage, of conducting hybrid warfare, damaging undersea cables and critical infrastructure. The whole debate on the Russian shadow fleet, as it has been coined. And under the current agreement, I think it's 28 Russian vessels have the license to fish in Faroese waters. So the Faroe Islands have been, since 22, the Faroe Islands have been adopting all EU sanctions and, donating money to Ukraine, taking in Ukrainian refugees, condemning the war, etc., etc. But at the same time, they have, just like Norway, continued this fishery cooperation with Norway, which is not violating EU sanctions, because food and food products are not included in EU sanctions. So you can do two things at the same time without breaching, EU, the European approach, and the European sanctions regime vis-a-vis Russia. And the Faroes has just banned or kicked out two ships that are owned by two blacklisted Russian shipping companies that are accused of hybrid warfare. And every time the Faroe Islands is following EU sanctions, the Russians have warned against, retaliations. If you do this, if you follow the EU, we don't have a bilateral fishery agreement. But so far, the Russians have not reacted, and this agreement is still in place. So we are witnessing, both the Russian fleet sailing around, as well as rising American military presence. So with those words, I hope that I have given you some, background knowledge on some of the issues that are currently shaping the two election races that are taking place here in the Faroe Islands simultaneously. And you are welcome to, I will try and do my best to answer some of the questions that you might have. So thank you very much.
Heini, thank you so much. I think that was a good presentation. You covered quite a few topics in short time, so thanks for that. I think now we'll try to open up for questions. And I see we've got Bruno Kaufmann with us this afternoon. And Bruno, you've kindly been writing your questions in the chat, but we also, since we are now all online today, if you have a chance to open up for your microphone, then you're welcome to take the floor and ask your questions to Heini. Thanks.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this briefing. It's very interesting and pointing out important points. I have a few questions. The first is about the rationale and strategy about holding the Lagting elections just 2 days after the Folketing elections. Both are early elections, and my question is basically: has your Prime Minister had an idea that the Faroese population would be some form informed by the result of the Folketing election, and in which way could that influence the Faroese elections?
Thank you very much. A good question, a question that many people ask themselves. As far as I understand, this was not coordinated. The Faroese election was called before the Danish election. And it had to do with a specific domestic crisis in the Faroese coalition that had nothing to do with statehood or Russia or the US or Trump or anything. It had something to do with some domestic, internal political issues regarding an undersea tunnel in the Faroe Islands, which will be a huge infrastructure project. One of the coalition parties said that if we are going to do this fifth undersea tunnel, which will, to my knowledge, be the world's longest undersea tunnel, we need to do some economic reforms as well. And then they couldn't agree on that, and therefore the coalition collapsed, and elections were called, and a couple of days afterwards, Mette Frederiksen, the Danish prime minister, called elections in Denmark. So I don't think this is an optimal situation for anyone, not for the Faroese government. They are doing pretty bad in the polls. So, and as far as I have, when I've been talking to people in party politics in the Faroes, this is a quite confusing situation. And I think everybody would prefer these two elections to be held, in different periods in this year. So that's as far as I understand things. Yeah.
But where could you see like a connection? I mean, if you have the result from Denmark, what could be the scenarios influencing your election?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. It's very hard. I think people are really considering these as two different elections. You might, for instance, see a new right-wing conservative government, and also people will send a social democrat to represent us in Denmark. The polls that we are seeing are for the Faroese national election, and because the voting behavior is different, then it's very hard to say anything about voting behavior for the Danish election. So it remains to be seen. I think as I mentioned earlier, I think the election for the Danish parliament is very much driven by individual profiles. So, for instance, we have a social democrat in the Danish Folketing called Sjúrður Skaale right now. His party will do very bad in the Faroese election, but because he's a quite big profile and a little bit like a one-man show, he might very well get elected as well. It wouldn't surprise me if we will see some very different election results for those two, but we will have to see. So don't quote me too literally on that.
Yes, thank you. Sjúrður already made his bye-bye speech in the Folketing.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, I have two more questions, but I don't want to monopolize. Maybe there are others who want to put a question forward. Yeah.
I think, Bruno, if you have a last one, then get your last question in, and then we will go after that. We'll open the floor to Maria, and then after that to Rita. So okay. Bruno, you can have one more, then we go to Maria. Thanks.
Okay, I have the question. I'm just now in Reykjavik in Iceland and discussing the forthcoming EU advisory referendum on continuing the accession talks with the EU. Would a yes vote here in Iceland have an influence on the debate and discussions in the Faroe Islands regarding European policies?
It would definitely make an impact, because the Faroes, when it comes to fishery, the Faroes is looking to Norway. How does Norway approach Russia? And at the same time, we're also looking to Iceland when it comes to how do they navigate on the international scene. And the Faroe Islands chose to stay out of the European Union when Denmark joined in 1973. And the main argument against membership is fishery. Fishery is very important in the Faroe Islands, and there is indeed a lot of valuable fish stocks, and you don't want to share Faroese national waters with Spanish and German and French and Portuguese trawlers. So it's very much this. So there has been a quite profound, broadly embedded Euroscepticism in the Faroe Islands, not because people don't like the European Union as such, but because you don't want to share waters with regard to fishery. So if there would be a scenario, that is something that people talk about, where you got some, how do you say, some reservations or some opt-outs, saying that, okay, we can join the European Union, but without joining the common European fishery policy, for instance, that would drastically change perceptions in the Faroes. So I don't think that the Faroes automatically will follow Iceland. The Faroes certainly does have their own independent views on this, regardless of Iceland or Norway, but it would definitely make an impact. Not least given the geopolitical context and unpredictability and insecurity, etc. But it wouldn't automatically mean that the Faroes would follow Iceland if Iceland decides to join the European Union.
Thank you, Heini. I think we are going to say good afternoon to Maria joining us. We'll go to Maria first from Spain. And I forgot to say initially, but if you would be kind, if you when you post your questions, just say hello to Heini and also say if you're a freelancer or which media you work for. That would be great. Thanks. But Maria, the floor is yours.
Apparently the video is disabilitated, so okay, can you hear me?
We do hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
There we go.
Oh gosh, what I did.
We can both hear you and see you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not the most technical person. I'm sorry. So this is Maria Paz Lopez from Spanish newspaper La Vanguardia. And part of my first question was already answered with the question of Bruno, but still I have some doubts. So are the Faroe Islands looking at Norway as a model for this fishery thing just because Norway isn't inside the European Union, is not a member, or because some specific trait of their fishery policy, please? That would be one thing. And the other thing is, you mentioned earlier that it's foreseeable a right-wing government. I wanted to ask to what extent right-wing government? Is it just right, or it's too right in the general trend of this rise of very right-wing governments in Europe? Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Regarding the first question, no, I don't think it has much to do with the fact that Norway is outside of Europe. It has more to do with the fact that Norway has a similar bilateral fishery agreement with Russia. And so does the Faroes. So therefore, it's quite natural to look at Norway. How is Norway, navigating this dilemma? On the one hand, you adopt sanctions and you want to be part of the West, you want to be part of Europe and NATO vis-a-vis Russia, but at the same time, you have this fishery cooperation. So that's why I think the Faroe Islands is looking at Norway. Norway is arguing that we are administering the world's largest cod stock in the world. And if we don't have an agreement, we will just start to fish on our own, and that will, destroy the stock, and it will be unsustainable fishery that will, nothing will be left in a few years. And the Faroe Islands has somehow tried also to adopt that logic that, it's international cooperation is a precondition for sustainable fisheries. So that has been one argument. So that's the main reason why the Faroes are looking at Norway, also with regard to imposing partial closure of harbors for the Russian fleet, having stronger inspections, etc., etc. So that's, I think, I hope that replies your first question. And the second question was, yes, what kind of right-wing government or parties are we talking about? That's a very good question, because I don't think you should regard it as the rise of populism that many people are talking about, because immigration hasn't really been an issue in the Faroe Islands. Certainly not immigration from the Muslim majority world. It hasn't really been an issue. It is maybe starting to surfacing now, but the Faroe Islands has historically been a quite homogeneous society. But we are seeing a transition from, being a very homogeneous society to much more immigration, and that's because workers are coming in, because the growth rates are so high, the unemployment is extremely low, the economy is really booming, and you need people to work, and we experience that. So that is starting to become an issue, but it hasn't really been a topic in Faroese politics. I think you should perceive it more as more classical conservative right-wing parties, but with one difference compared to European politics, and that's that religion, Christianity, is much stronger in the Faroe Islands compared to the rest of the Nordic societies, which is why issues such as abortion, LGBT rights, homosexual marriage, stuff like that, has the trans issue, are very divisive in Faroese politics, in Faroese value politics, because Christianity plays a stronger role in Faroese politics compared to at least the Nordic countries, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, etc. So abortion, for instance, that's a big issue in Faroes at the moment. So you could think of it in those terms, if that is a satisfying response.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question,
Yeah.
please? Well, you mentioned Christianity, and I would like to know a bit more. Which denomination is this? Is there a national church like in, I don't know, Norway or Denmark? Yeah. How does it? What is the organization of the church there, please?
Yes. So it's Lutheran Protestant Christianity. We have a national church, just like a public national church funded by the state, just like in Denmark, and still in Norway. Sweden has privatized its church, but then you have a lot of Christian, denominations and movements outside the established, state church or public church. Missionaries coming from Norway and from the UK 100 years ago, establishing all sorts of Christian denominations outside the official church, which has a huge influence in Faroese society and in Faroese politics today. Evangelical Christianity that you might associate with the US, so like a political evangelical Christianity that shapes local debates on some of these issues that I talked about earlier: abortion, LGBT rights, etc.
Thank you. And I think I see a hand from Portugal. So Rita, if you're with us this afternoon, you're welcome to take the floor. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Rita Cruz. I am a correspondent for the Portuguese news agency Lusa. I have two questions, and my first question is in regards to the Danish parliamentary campaign. And I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about what sort of role, what sort of space do the topics regarding the Faroe Islands take in the actual Danish campaign, if any, and why? And the second one is in regards to the United States, and if there are any sort of relationship or cooperation with the United States in the Faroe Islands, and if there's any parallels with the relationship that Greenland has with the United States. If you could just describe a little bit of that. I hope that was clear.
Yes. Could you maybe repeat the first one, the first question? I'm not sure I
Absolutely.
I got it correctly. Sorry, thank you.
So in the Faroe Islands elect two members of parliament in Copenhagen. And so I was wondering, what if the Faroe Islands occupy some sort of space in the discussions in the campaign, if there are topics that are part of the main topics in the campaign, if any relates to the Faroe Islands and what they are and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in many respects, the role of the Faroese politicians in the Danish parliament is fundraising for different Faroese projects. It's a paradox, because on the one hand, the Faroe Islands is gradually reducing, annual Danish subsidies all the time. At the moment, it's less than 10% of the national Faroese budget, and you consider that, as a road towards greater national self-determination, that we want to be economically independent. But at the same time, sometimes we forget to say that the Faroese politicians in the Danish parliament are, receiving a lot of money from the Danish national budget in order to, do all sorts of projects in the Faroes. Another role that they have, which is part of the election race here, is that as long as Denmark is in charge of foreign policy, defense, security, we should have our representation. We should have people in the Danish parliament, because when, for instance, the Danish parliament is adopting a huge, military capacity package, they are currently, because of Donald Trump's, pressure, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars spent on defense and security in Greenland at the moment. And some of that money will also be spent in the Faroe Islands. And that's an argument, why we should have people in the Danish parliament to be part of those discussions. And the counter argument is that, we have national governments. We don't need people in Denmark, PMs, because the governments are talking on a governmental level. So the government in Tórshavn, the government in Nuuk, and the government in Copenhagen, they should be coordinating these things, if that makes any sense. So these are, I don't know if I'm addressing your question correctly, but these are some of the issues and dilemmas and debates taking place that we are voting for two parliaments. And the second question was the US, right? You cannot at all compare, the American presence in Greenland and in the Faroe Islands, because it has been much more, massive in Greenland. However, there was American military presence in the Faroe Islands during the Cold War. The Faroe Islands were an integrated part of the NATO early warning system that was supposed to anticipate Russian aggression or Soviet aggression during the Cold War. And some of those Cold War debates are now re-emerging, that, we need new and better military surveillance radars. We should see more American military presence. And the US also had their own separate mission in the Faroe Islands during the Cold War. But it couldn't be, it can't be compared to the defense agreements that are in place, that have been signed by Denmark and Greenland and the US. And, the Faroe Islands were occupied by the UK during World War II. It was never occupied by the US. It was a friendly occupation, while Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany. So there has been American presence in the Faroe Islands, just like in Iceland and in Greenland, but much more present in Greenland, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Could I just ask for
clarification? Sure. No, go ahead, please.
But that presence today, what does it look like? The U.S. presence.
Yeah. Well, the presence today is the presence on sea. It's the maritime presence, because just like the Americans left most bases in Greenland, they're only left in the Pitufik space base in northern Greenland. Just like the Americans left the Keflavik base in Iceland in around 2006 or 7, they also left the Faroe Islands, and military surveillance radars that were in place, up and running. That was not under US, but under NATO, leadership. It was deactivated, in 2006 or 7. So now there are new investments in security and defense, and we are now waiting to see in the near future a new American-produced military surveillance radar will be installed in the Faroe Islands, the same place as it used to be. So at the moment, the only American military presence is at sea. It's the maritime traffic at sea that we are seeing. Yeah, many American submarines actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heini. Thank you, Rita. I think we got some 5 to 10 minutes left, so there's time for another couple of questions in the chat. Please indicate in the chat if you have a question. I think we're happy to say welcome to Thomas next. The floor is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. This is Thomas Borchert from Frankfurt Rundschau in Germany. Shudo gave a remarkable speech in the Danish Folketing concerning Israel and Gaza. And he took a very clear stand. And I'm just interested how the reactions, the echo on the Faroe Islands were both in principle, it was okay that he took such a clear stand on foreign politics, and then also what do people in the Faroes say about Israel and Gaza? Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting question. It was a very, divisive speech, just like, this whole topic is so divisive and so polarizing in the rest of the Nordic countries and in Europe at large. So some people loved the speech. The pro-Israeli people loved his speech, and he will probably, even though he's a social democrat, he belongs to the left specter in Faroese politics, but he would probably get a lot of votes because he has been very vocal in some of those international debates that have been taking place. He has been very pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, and also very, pro-Israeli in many respects. So it's a divisive issue also in the Faroe Islands. And given, as I mentioned earlier, given the fact that Christianity plays a larger role in the Faroes compared to some of the other Nordic countries, we have some, Christian groups that are very, pro-Israel, if you could put it like that. So those people would normally not vote for the left in elections, but they were, very happy with the speech. But we have certainly also had, criticism and demonstrations against the war in Gaza. We have also NGOs, supporting Palestinian statehood and protesting the Israeli occupation, etc., etc. So I think the Faroese debate does very much reflect. It's quite similar to the debate that is taking place in the rest of the Scandinavian and the Nordic countries. The Faroe Islands actually has an embassy in Israel. Because we have a very small very religious party in Faroese politics. They became, decisive regarding when there were elections, not 4 years ago, but actually 8 years ago. they get maybe 5% of the vote. And they had one, condition for joining the coalition and that was to establish not an embassy, but it's called a diplomatic representation office in Israel, even though, export to Israel is very limited. So that's a quite symbolic move, but that shows that there is a part of, there are groups or a segment within the voter public in the Faroe Islands, which is very pro-Israeli, and Sjúrður Skaale will probably get some of those votes, even though he's part of the Social Democrats, which are in general much more secular and liberal when it comes to other issues such as LGBT rights, abortion, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hani. We go to Spain again, I think. We should have Ancho from the Spanish news agency with us. Ancho, you're there? Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah, well.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hello. My name is Ancho Lamela. I work for the Spanish news agency. I live in Copenhagen, so I'm not in Spain. So my question is about the topics in the campaign, because even if you live in Denmark and speak Danish, it's very difficult to follow with the Faroe Islands, because it's not the same with Greenland, where it's very easy. We have better information in Danish, but not so much about the Faroe Islands. So my question is very simple: which have been the main topics in the campaign? And second question is, why do you think this being the polls are pointing to a change of government? What are the reasons? Which are the reasons why there is a? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good question. One topic is the whole question on statehood. That's certainly not the only question. Another question is the economy, because it's a paradox, because on the one hand, the Faroese economy is very strong. The growth rates are very high, actually higher than in Denmark. Unemployment is record low, and it's a quite rich society. But at the same time, the national budget is continually, it's a deficit, both the national and if you look at the smaller, municipalities. So we generally spend more than we earn, and some of the parties are saying that we need to do some painful economic reforms in order to make the economy strong and stable and viable in the long run. So that's also a quite central debate in the current election race. Another central topic is housing. It's extremely expensive to get your own home in the Faroe Islands. I know this is an issue in so many places in Europe and around the world, but the prices are quite crazy. So it's very hard for a young new family to buy your own house and establish your own family. It's some parties say that this is the most pressing issue of all issues. We need a more flexible housing market, more renting opportunities, etc., which leads me to another pressing issue, which is the fact that even though the population is growing, we also see that a lot of young people are leaving the Faroe Islands in order to study abroad, mostly in Copenhagen. Just like I did, just like all my friends did, you go abroad to study at university. I studied in the UK and in Copenhagen, and many people do that. Around 50% of every year, how do you say, årgang, what does that mean? Yeah, you understand, does leave. Okay. And maybe just half of those that leave ever come back. So we see a constant, how do you say, an emigration, an exodus of young, bright people that will get higher educations that never return. And so that's also a huge issue. I myself work at the university, and so the role of the university and more educational options in the Faroe Islands is something that is very central. They are currently building a new university campus, which is great. But so you need some heavy investments in education as well, because we are competing with the big universities abroad in the countries around us. So that's also one thing. We are seeing people also coming home because I mean my salary is actually better here than much better than if I was in a UK university. So it can also be attractive to get home, but we see that this is still a big challenge. So the rise in the population is also due to foreign workers, immigrant workers who come, which changes the demography in the Faroe Islands. So the Faroe Islands are these days becoming a more multicultural place, which is very important for the economy, but it does also raise the same, issues and conflicts regarding immigration in general that you are so used to in Denmark and in the rest of Europe. So that topic is becoming also an issue, maybe for the first time. It has not been an issue at all in Faroese politics, but it is slightly becoming an issue now. As we are experiencing this transition from a quite homogeneous society to a more ethnic, multinational, linguistic society as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ancho. Was there a second question from you? I can't remember, or was that it?
Oh yeah, it was something about why does he think that? I mean, which are the reasons that is going to be a change of government? If there's something specific, or it's more like, yeah.
Good question. I don't think I have a very good answer to that question, because it's hard to pinpoint to say that it's one single or simple reason. There have been some clashes between the government and some of the labor unions regarding economic reforms. We had a huge strike. The nurses in the Faroe Islands went on a strike. So there have been some bumps on the road, but I don't think you could boil it down to any specific thing really. So because I mean things are in general going, the economy is strong, and things are in general, the Faroese society is in a good shape, but so it's probably a combination of many different things, and maybe just a general tiredness of seeing the same people in power after 4 years. Yeah.
Thank you. It's now coming up to almost 3:00 in Copenhagen. So I think, did I see one more hand from Maria again?
Can I? Okay.
Then there's 1 minute for last question and a last answer, and then we'll say
I will be very quick.
goodbye. Thanks. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to check if, in Greenland, independently of this Trump thing, we know that there is a resentment in society against Denmark because of the grievances from the colonial and post-colonial past. And I was wondering if such a thing exists also in Faroe Islands or not. And also would like to know if you are a native of the Faroe Islands, which I think you are, but tell me, please. Thank you.
Yes, as far as I know, I'm a native. I was born and raised in Tórshavn. So yes, I'm a native, but we're not indigenous. We're not considered an indigenous people. But regarding Greenland, it's a very good last question, because there's a lot of resentment. The atmosphere in Greenland is very, I don't know what you would call it, anti-Danish, because we have seen that some of the darker chapters in the colonial history, Danish Greenlandic colonial history, have been surfacing. We have the spiral scandal and the forced removal of children, etc., etc., and it's a huge resentment at the moment. But I think that the pressure from the outside, from Washington, has pulled people closer together, at least on a political level, the relationship between Greenland and Denmark. You could not at all compare, we don't have the same atmosphere in the Faroe Islands, not at all. Or the Faroese, quest for greater national autonomy or even statehood, it emanates from something else. It emanates from some more economic interests, some more practical, pragmatic economic interests, better free trade agreements, the ambition to join international organizations and stuff like that. But if you go back to the 90s, you could indeed, compare the situation to what Greenland is going through today. The Faroe Islands went bankrupt in the early 90s, and that was, because of Faroese irresponsible fiscal policies. But it also triggered a crisis in the Faroese-Danish relationship, and Denmark was accused of all sorts of things. But ever since, today the atmosphere is very different. You still have an independent party which does perceive Denmark as an illegitimate colonial power, but you cannot really compare the very tense atmosphere in Greenland and the Faroe Islands today.
Thank you, Heini. With that, I think we tied it all up with the Faroese Islands, Greenland, Denmark. A lot gonna happen in the elections in a little bit more than a week from now. So I think a big thanks to all the journalists who joined us this afternoon, and an even bigger thanks to you, Heini, who took an hour of your time to join us here at the International Press Center for the first time. We are very grateful you had the time to do that, and we hope to see you again, of course.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Can I just add that if you write articles, publish something about the Faroes on the basis of this conversation, you are very welcome to send me a link. So just a brief note. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Of course, I should have said that. It's perfect you mentioned that as well. Please do remember to send a copy to Heini if you take some quotes out of the briefing today. That would be very helpful. And also, I've agreed with Heini that I'll share his email address with all of you. So if there should be any follow-up questions or any other things you might want to ask after this, there should be a way to do this. So again, on behalf of the IPC and all of us here in Copenhagen, we wish Heini and the rest of you a good election when that time comes, the week after next, and a very good weekend to all of you. Thanks. See you soon.